Hello and welcome to today's Cyberfest event, which I think is number 9 out of 14 that we've got. The Northeast's biggest cybersecurity festival, back again for its 4th year, even talking about next year already, so that's really good. It's an event, a series of events that's really got something for everybody. And today we're going to focus on particularly the effect of manufacturing and cybersecurity effect on manufacturing and logistics, etc. Really important sectors for Teesside, if not for the whole of the Northeast. So could you put in my slides, please, Claire? So here's the format for today. Obviously, hugely grateful for Teesside University for helping us to put this on, as well as Digital City. It says that Lindsay Robinson is going to speak on behalf of Digital City and Teesside University, but we've had a late change to the programme, and Siobhan Fenton, Associate Dean of Enterprise and Business Engagement at the university, is going to talk with us. Then we'll be followed by Maran and talking about Policy Manager at Make UK, big organisation supporting the manufacturing industry. We'll be talking about the Industrial Digitalisation Technology Centre from Dr. David Hughes, again, Materials Engineering at Teesside University. And there's going to be a talk about Made Smarter, the Technology Accelerator, again, something that really the Tees Valley Combined Authority is behind. Then we're going to have a couple of presentations on cybersecurity itself, one from David Johnson, Cybersecurity Director at Communicate Technology PLC, and then back to Introduction to Industrial System Security for Ben Caley from Siemens Industrial Security Services, and then back to another important sector for Teesside particularly, but cybersecurity in the gaming industry, a lot of parallels between that and what's going on within manufacturing. And that's from Callum, Duncan, Managing Director at Sencode. I'm really grateful to all the speakers who got involved in this today. Next slide, please, Claire. So I wanted to tell you a bit about Cyber North. So Cyberfest is brought to you by Cyber North, Dynamo's cybersecurity cluster for the Northeast region, both supported by the Accenture and the Innovation Super Network. So we're recognised by the Department of Culture, Media and Sport and the National Cybersecurity Centres representing the region. We're also a member of the new UK Cyber Cluster Collaboration, or UKC3, which does what it says on the tin, and I'll come back to that in a minute. And also Global EPIC, an international collaboration of cybersecurity clusters. So we're well recognised both locally, nationally, and now internationally. So we're working to grow the industry across the region and to position the Northeast is a great place to do cybersecurity business. We're working to grow jobs, highly skilled, well-paid and interesting jobs. And we're doing this in 4 ways. Oops. Click, thank you. I thought that was maybe something I did, but there you go. So we're doing this in 4 ways. The first is we make a lot of noise to raise awareness and build belief. And we do this through events culminating in Cyberfest, as I've said, the Northeast's biggest cybersecurity festival, which happens September every year so far. So this is our 4th year. And I think we've certainly made progress in this area. The second thing we're trying to do is to help existing businesses to grow in a collaborative yet competitive framework. We're working on mechanisms to support this and bring opportunity to the 70 or so cybersecurity businesses that already exist here in the Northeast. The third thing we're trying to do is to create new businesses by developing a cybersecurity innovation centre, or CAIN, in the region. A full business case on this is with DCMS now, and we're waiting to find out whether funding will be available. But like everybody in central government at the moment, everybody's waiting to see if funding will be available. And the final thing that we're trying to do is to support young people into careers within the cybersecurity sector, or perhaps people who are thinking about changing their career. We undertook a large piece of work earlier this year with the support of DCMS, and we're working on that as soon as I get out of Cyberfest. Next slide, please, Claire. So I said I'd come back to UKC3. This is an exciting new venture, bringing all of the UK cybersecurity clusters together, following a process of recognition. There are about 20 or so that we're aware of, and just under half of these have been recognised so far. So the Cyber North is one of those clusters that's been recognised, and bringing all these clusters together allows us to do a few things. We're focusing on 3 areas in particular, which are not surprisingly very similar to the areas that Cyber North is focusing on. So ecosystem development, looking at how all the clusters work together to help each other, bringing different skills, sharing good practice, etc. Through ecosystem development. We're looking at innovation. The country needs more innovation in cybersecurity. We need new products to address emerging issues. And so we have a particular work stream looking at innovation. And finally, skills. trying to bring all of the activities across the country together to a coordinated effort. So CyberNorth has been given some financial support from DCMS, a small amount of money, well, a reasonable amount of money actually, and we're going to use this to put a team together to give us a better understanding of the market, help us to engage better with the market, and give us a clearer direction of what it is that we need to do to deliver. Next slide, Claire, please. So that's a whistle-stop tour to CyberNorth. There's clearly a lot going on. If you're involved in the regional cybersecurity scene in any way, please be a part of what we're trying to do. Thank you. So my next speaker is Siobhan Fenton, as I've said, Dean of, or Deputy Dean of Teesside University. Are you there, Siobhan?
I am, yes. I'm just turning on my video. There we go. Okay, hello everybody. Thank you so much, Phil. So yes, as Phil said, my name is Siobhan Fenton. I'm the Associate Dean for Enterprise Business Engagement. A long title here, but in the School of Computing, Engineering and Digital Technologies, which is obviously fit very, very well with a cyber event. So I just want to say a little bit around Teesside University, just to give a little bit of context, particularly around the sort of cybersecurity courses and the support that we do, but also for Digital City, because as you know, Lindsay Robinson, director, was going to be speaking to this. So I'll just start with Digital City. So obviously I'm here at Teesside University now, and as part of that, we have Digital City, which is all about that support, that digital support, including cyber, of course, to those businesses in the Tees Valley. So that could include things like pen testing, but also really supporting those company startups and accelerator programs. So there's a whole range of support to really support companies in the region, in the Tees Valley, grow. And we can, again, if anybody's really interested, they can contact myself or Lindsay Robinson if they know them to that support. With Teesside University, for those of you know, I mean, I've got a picture behind me, but actually I am at the university on the campus at the moment, and it does look like that. It is sunny at Tees Valley, and we do have all the students back. And for us, in terms of how we support business, but also how we support, just like Phil was mentioning there, in terms of that sort of, you know, lifelong learning support as well for businesses. We do run, as you can imagine, a range of undergraduate and postgraduate courses in cybersecurity. I think we've got just under 100 across the 3 years for the cybersecurity networks. We've also got all sorts of complementary courses, as you can imagine, in computer science, artificial intelligence, data analytics. But for the cyber, we've got about just under 100, and we've got about just over 200 on the postgraduate. So very, very popular here. We've also got an online postgraduate course, which is quite an interesting way for flexible learning as well, to support you in next year, next September. 2022, which obviously we're all hoping we're all still on campus and everything is back to normal, like it is now. We're going to be running a degree apprenticeship for cyber analysts as well, so that's quite exciting, and we do quite a lot of support as we grow those apprenticeships for companies if they're interested in actually looking for an apprentice, and we match it to our existing degrees. So there's again marvelous kind of opportunities for you perhaps to take on apprentices who've already done a year with us, and then they go on and do a degree apprenticeship. So lots of opportunities there if you're interested. That will be starting next year. But finally, just in terms of, I guess, how we support industry, really, we are really focused on that sort of holistic approach in terms of we make those connections with companies and really try and support them from their recruitment needs, their own skills development needs, right the way through to sort of collaborative research we do. So again, it's wonderful to see some of those companies that we're already in contact with who are going to be speaking today or have had support from Digital City already. But again, we're just really keen to keep that going, and you can contact me anytime for that. So the final thing to say is that we've set up which my colleague David Hughes is going to be talking about, an Industrial Digitalisation Technology Centre, which again is all about that kind of funded support, including cybersecurity, right the way through to interesting areas to do with IoT and also virtual reality and augmented reality as well. So David will be touching on that. But it's just to say, wonderful to be supporting this and supporting Phil and the team in terms of these events, and look forward to running the next one. I know Phil just mentioned it ahead of time, but running it on the campus, hopefully this time next year. So thank you so much, everybody, and have a good afternoon as it is now. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much for that, everyone. Teesside University have been very supportive right throughout the Cyberfest. I think we've had a couple of events there, a couple of events online, so we'll see how that goes. Hopefully we'll get back to it properly next year. I come across students from Teesside in many aspects of, and many things that we talk about, and I think we may have one or two on the call today. So my next person to speak is Maran from, it's a policy manager at Make UK, the manufacturers organisation. I think it's pitched at. Are you there, Aaron?
Thank you very much, Phil. I shall probably start by just quickly sharing my screen. Give me a second. Okay, I'm hoping everyone can see that.
Yes, we can.
Perfect. So I shall probably start off by just giving a short introduction to myself. Aaron Maran, Policy Manager at Make UK. I currently lead on our cybersecurity portfolio and have done for around a year now. Prior to that, I spent 4 years working from our Brussels office, looking at data policy, along with working on Brexit, which no doubt all of you are aware of. Quick introduction to Make UK and who we are. I'd hope that most of you are aware of Make UK and the role it plays, but Make UK represent and champion the manufacturing sector, from large manufacturing companies such as Nissan, Rolls-Royce and Caterpillar to SMEs. SMEs play a large and vital role within the sector, making up the supply chains that lead to these larger manufacturing companies. The Northeast is rich in manufacturing companies, and thus it was a great pleasure to accept the invitation to speak at this event. So probably the next question I'd look to answer is, why is Make UK looking at cybersecurity? Make UK has long looked at digitisation of industry. This digitisation allows businesses to perform better, close the productivity gap and remain competitive, not just domestically, but internationally. And the benefits of digitisation are long heralded. But what we found was one of the barriers facing businesses looking to further digitise is cybersecurity. Cybersecurity and digitisation are two sides of the same coin, and the need to consider cybersecurity at the onset of further digitisation is imperative to ensure that cybersecurity is at the heart of any plans for any digital infrastructure within businesses. Extremely important. The manufacturing sector is largely made up of complex supply chains, so the need to not only have your own business secure, but also ensuring that your supply chain is equally secure is business critical, and also leads on to sort of supply chain resilience, which is a big topic at the minute, around ensuring that your supply chain is stress tested and able to continue throughout different business environments, and cybersecurity definitely plays into that. Cybersecurity awareness is equally important though, and the profile of cybersecurity has definitely raised over the past sort of 12 to 24 months, with a lot more high profile and larger cybersecurity attacks hitting mainstream news. I'd probably just highlight a couple, just to sort of give an impression that it's not just small companies that need to look at this, but obviously there are large companies that you'd almost believe were sort of untouchable, have been hit with severe cyber attacks that have cost them considerable amounts of money or stopped output. So most recently we had the US fuel pipeline, Colonial Pipeline. They suffered a ransomware attack. Ransomware attacks are fairly prevalent in the cyberspace and is one of the methods that cyber criminals use. It took their service down for 5 days and shut completely down. This had a massive effect on national infrastructure in the US. Another one, which was quite a large one, and definitely hit mainstream news, was the cyber attack of SolarWinds. They're a major US technology firm, and they have a lot of large clients. So again, this sort of links back to the need for supply chain resilience, because the attack on SolarWinds then obviously led to it impacting their own clients, and some of their clients are some of the largest businesses in the world globally, such as Microsoft, Intel, Deloitte, and even some state departments within the US. One cyber attack closer to home that some of you may have heard of is the British Airways one. British Airways faced a cyber attack where customers looking to gain access to British Airways website were diverted to a fraudulent site, which resulted in their personal data being obtained by cyber criminals and obviously personal data being lost. Naturally, becoming more cyber secure for a business offers a competitive advantage. We'll come on to some specific statistics slightly later in my presentation, but it allows you to unlock new customers and explore new markets. More and more contracts, procurement contracts, or companies that are open to tender will now look at what said company is doing and how robust their cybersecurity system is. Earlier this year, I authored and published our Make UK Cyber Security Report. It gained some really good traction. I also appeared on several podcasts discussing the findings, and I shall now just run you through some of the key stats from the report. So these are some of the headline figures, but I will just run you through them. The manufacturing sector is still one of the most targeted sectors when it comes to cybercrime. That's not just according to Make UK, but that's according to the National Cyber Security Centre, which we work closely with. This is mainly due to the valuable IP many businesses store. The need for a cybersecurity system fit for purpose goes beyond just your company, as highlighted before, and extends throughout your supply chain. So a lot of large companies will obviously have many smaller companies that make up their supply chain, and valuable data and IP is obviously exchanged between all of those companies throughout the supply chain. So usually the weakest link will be the one that's targeted. So yes, manufacturing still obviously remains one of the most targeted, which just means that manufacturers have to act and ensure that they've got cyber security that is fit for purpose. One of the most astonishing figures was 46% of manufacturers have experienced a cyber attack in the past 12 months. That's obviously a substantial amount. Not all of those lead to access gained or granted, and not substantial losses, but still that is more than just receiving a phishing email. That is where cyber criminals have gained some limited access to manufacturers within the UK. So it's a concerning figure, but it just demonstrates the need for manufacturers to act at this point in time to ensure they have got a cyber security system which is again fit for purpose. Moving on to some other figures, monetary cost of the companies that faced a cyber attack. One of the key stats is 22% faced a cost between £5,000 and £25,000. Now, the monetary cost is a big issue, but equally to be considered is the reputational damage of facing a cyber attack. So it's not only just costing you a certain amount of money, but equally it is damaging your reputation. Looking at other key statistics from our report, 61% now have a board director responsible for cybersecurity, and 40% say it's now a higher priority since the start of the pandemic. Touching on the last statistic there of around it becoming a higher priority since the start of the pandemic, naturally we would expect that because a large swathes of the workforce were forced to work remotely, and that's not just exclusive to the manufacturing sector, that was across the economy, and that unlocked different challenges and presented different challenges for businesses. A lot of them were potentially using different internet sources rather than from the office Wi-Fi. So different challenges, but equally needed to be addressed. But it is refreshing and reassuring that now 61% have a board director responsible, which just demonstrates that it is not only just making mainstream news, but equally it's translating to businesses taking action and ensuring that cybersecurity is discussed at the highest levels of business. A couple of other key points. So manufacturers are now facing external pressures to show and demonstrate their cyber robustness, as highlighted above, or as highlighted earlier, sorry. More and more clients and customers within supply chains are now asking customers to demonstrate their cyber robustness. 43% of manufacturers have been asked by a customer or supplier to demonstrate said robustness. A further 20% have asked a supplier to demonstrate their cybersecurity. This used to be predominantly, in years gone past, mainly restricted to sort of MOD and government contracts to ensure that these companies that were bidding for government or MOD contracts, that they were able to demonstrate cybersecurity. But now it's actually reflecting across the whole manufacturing sector and isn't just exclusive to government or Ministry of Defence contracts. So equally, it's again another challenge to demonstrate said cybersecurity, but equally it offers up different opportunities to potentially bid for different contracts and actually grow your business. Moving on, 1 in 8 companies say that cybersecurity is preventing them from adopting in digital technologies, as highlighted above, or earlier, sorry. It is one of the barriers for further digitalisation, but it is absolutely imperative that we overcome these challenges in order to encourage greater adoption of digital technologies, which we know will lead to reduced costs, increased productivity and better quality of products. Driving forward this agenda will be crucial for recovery and coming out of the pandemic. The last couple of points that I'll touch on, and then more than happy to open up to questions if there are any. 2/3 of companies cited cost as being one of the biggest barriers to becoming cyber secure. However, it is vitally important for businesses to look at these costs against the potential cost of a cyber attack. Being cyber robust equally can open up new markets, but also a lot of things and a lot of tools and techniques that companies can be doing aren't necessarily costly. 2-factor stage authentication, changing passwords periodically, making sure you update your software regularly. These are all things that can be done free of charge that foster a good culture within the business, but also add added layers of protection. And I'll finish off on the final point, and then I'll do a quick wrap up. But while manufacturers seem confident they have the tools and processes in place to protect themselves, half offer no training to staff, and a similar number have no formal plan in place in the event of a cyber attack. So it is imperative that companies start looking at risk assessments of their business and how they respond if they were to face a cyber attack. And then probably just to end, as in I've touched a lot on the need for a cybersecurity system, but equally important is adopting and fostering a culture within your business, empowering your employees to report or send through any suspicious emails, and adopting a no-blame culture. This will equally be an added layer to the protection. If an employee does happen to click on something or a suspicious email, you want them to feel comfortable that they're able to report that to their line manager or to their direct manager, so the company can begin acting and putting steps in place to prevent any further access being granted. If an employee isn't empowered and they happen to click on a suspicious link and actually don't tell anybody, obviously there could be further damage being done while they're not actually sharing it with the business. I'd probably just end there. I hope you found that somewhat useful. I'm more than happy to share the slides after as well. Thank you.
Maran, that's really great. Thank you very much. A couple of questions from me. I'll start off with a non-cybersecurity related question, but working from home, how does that work in manufacturing?
So the manufacturing sector is quite unique in that sense. So during the pandemic, you would have had a lot of the admin staff, a lot of the sales, the HR functions, the finance functions, all working at home where they were able to. And then what the production sort of side of manufacturers done was businesses started to open a lot longer. So rather than sort of opening up for 9 hours, they'd open up for a larger amount of time during the day to enable more people to, less people in at the same time. So the employees that were in the production teams or on the factory floor per se, they were able to sort of socially distance. Manufacturing did remain open during the pandemic, and it was a great benefit, obviously, to the business, to businesses and to the UK, where they played a large role in the PPE shortage and the sort of ventilator challenge at the beginning of the pandemic.
Yes, absolutely. Thank goodness that they were able to stay open. So, but did that not create a kind of two-tier workforce where the sort of administrative management staff seemed to be more protected, and the poor people on the shop floor, as we used to say, still had to commit themselves?
No, you're completely right, and there's still challenges with sort of bringing that together and bringing them back as one. There's still now a sort of new sort of landscape of work now, where some that have started working from home during the pandemic will continue to work from home, and it's understanding that equally there were challenges for people that remained in the workplace, but there were the same, well, not the same challenges, but challenges nonetheless for people working from home. So people working from home equally had challenges where if they were living in an extended household with their grandparents that were potentially shielding, or had children that weren't at school, were working far longer hours, potentially didn't have anywhere to work from, working from the kitchen table. So there was some sort of communications piece around both understanding that both were facing different challenges, people working from home, and equally so people that were still, like you said, on the factory floor.
So manufacturing, thanks for that. But manufacturing is such an important part of the Northeast economy. I'm told, and I'm not quite sure how true this is, but we're the only region in the whole country that has a positive balance of trade. We sell more than we actually consume. I'm not sure it's true sometimes, not true, but other times. But I'm interested in this whole management of supply chains because supply chains are really complicated now, as we've seen with some of them are breaking down at the moment under the severe pressure. How do businesses get to understand the multiple layers of supply management that they need to?
So you're very right, Phil, that supply chains and supply chain resilience and management has now come to the forefront. Mainly, I wouldn't just put it predominantly down to this, but mainly due to us leaving the EU. Large parts of the manufacturing sector for the past 40 years were intrinsically linked with the European countries, and it was a just-in-time supply chain where things would arrive, bang on time, be then worked on in the UK, and then seamlessly leave as soon as they're finished back over to the European mainland. These challenges have now arisen where it's not as easy or as seamless, but we've always encouraged manufacturers to start looking at sort of supply chain mapping, understanding what raw materials your business requires, and what companies are further below you in the supply chain, and then also where your product goes thereafter. Once you've finished working on it, where does it go next? We'd normally suggest beginning at probably looking at two below you, so two companies or two businesses below you that start off with the said raw material, and then two companies beyond you, to just gain a better understanding of exactly where your product starts from before it enters your factory, and then where it goes thereafter. But the manufacturing sector is extremely complex, so it could be made up of 15 or 20 different companies working on one piece alone before it then ends up at the end user, really. So a very complex picture, but I'd probably suggest looking just to start with it, sort of mapping two below and two above.
Yeah, that's good advice, because otherwise your head will just explode, won't it? But so we've had a question from the audience from Steve Berry, who's actually leads on nicely from what I've just been talking about, and that's the difference between OT and IT. So that at one time, I think manufacturers could contain their systems to manage their own business.
No.
Do we see that that's changing?
I think it's a very good point, the split between OT and IT. I think now with companies further digitizing, you've now got not just interconnected machines that are doing the production, you've also got internet connected machines looking at your HR, your finance, your holiday requests, and your personal details. Maybe 5 to 10 years ago, you had companies looking at new flashing machines that were able to improve productivity, but still had a lot of sort of paper and pens and analog systems looking after HR and your own personal records. Now they're becoming far more interlinked. It's vitally important you not only secure your factoring machines, but it's equally as important to obviously ensure that the employee data and all of that comes with OT is safe as well. There was an example that I had with a company that I was pulling together a case study for, that the cyber criminals actually gained access through their fire alarm system. So their fire alarm system was fully digitized, but it was the weakest link throughout their digital chain. They had lots of digital infrastructure within the business, but the one sort of weak link was their fire alarm system, which was completely digitized. And they were able to gain access through the fire alarm system and then actually work their way through into far more valuable data and IP within the business.
Yeah, I think it's just the whole world's becoming much more complicated, much more interlinked. But leads you on to our final question, if you don't mind, and that's that this 46% of businesses are admitted to being attacked. I'd suggest that 54% just don't realise it yet. I mean, when I was running Durham County Council's IT department, I think we had something like 2.5 million attempted hacks a day. It was something ludicrous. So businesses must be getting these spoof emails, these attempted spams, that sort of thing. So there's a huge amount of underreporting here. And how do we get people to take that more seriously? And those half that haven't offered any training at all, how do we get them on board?
I think you're completely right. I think you need to look at cybersecurity as an when I get attacked, not if I get attacked. It's not, there's no good reason for you to hope that you wouldn't get attacked and believe that, oh, well, they wouldn't be interested in my small company, because there is plenty of reason for cyber criminals to be interested in any company they can gain access to and gain leverage over. So I think it's always being expecting a cyber attack and having systems in place to prevent that. Similar to fire insurance, every business has fire insurance. They hope and pray that they'd never have to address a fire, but they have the insurance there and they have systems in place to prevent such a catastrophe. With regards to sort of how we address the ones that are not reporting or not offering training, I think it's largely an awareness piece. It's people understanding that digitization is two sides of the same coin as cybersecurity. So if you want to digitize, which no doubt all companies do, they see the long heralded benefits of digitizing that I mentioned also in the presentation. But it's also imperative to have cybersecurity there at the heart of all those plans to ensure that you don't, or that you are able to address those risks when they come knocking, because they definitely will come knocking. Excellent.
Thank you very much. And a great start to the program. Thank you very much for that. And if we get any questions coming through, we'll send them on to you and ask you to reply. So thank you very much.
No, thank you.
We're going to now talk about a really exciting initiative, the Industrial Digitalisation Technology Centre, which is within Teesside University, I believe, but I may have found out to be corrected. So we're going to hear from Dr. David Hughes, Associate Professor of Materials Engineering at Teesside University. Are you there, Dr. David Hughes?
I am indeed. Hello, can you see me okay?
Not yet. I can see just...
No?
I can see you now. Yes, there you go. Thank you very much. And I can see your screen.
Oh, excellent. Okay, just a little bit of a lag there. Yeah, well, thanks very much for inviting us to be with you today and talk about this exciting project. And, you know, a really nice follow on from the last speaker, because, you know, the opportunities of digitalization are obviously huge. And this project is all about, and the next speaker that you'll hear about as well, actually, is all about helping businesses to take steps on that digitalization journey. And what I'm really going to do in this session is tell you a little bit about that project and what we're trying to do. And actually, one of the key pieces of digital infrastructure that we're making available to businesses through this has just been awarded to Siemens. And so when Ben speaks later from Siemens, you'll get a really good view into some of the processes and protocols we're building in to this centre in partnership with Siemens and the other partners who are involved. to address those sort of challenges. So I'm going to take you on a little bit of a journey through what we're calling the Industrial Digitalisation Technology Centre. It's based in the university and it's a physical centre. But first, for a little bit of context, the number of things that are connected to the internet is just growing, enormously. We're rapidly heading towards 50 billion devices plus. And actually, that's accelerated even further than predicted due to COVID. So that means that, as we were just, hearing in the questions there, that fire alarms now are a risk. That so many previously inert things are doorways to cyber connection, and we want that cyber connection to go further. We don't just want to monitor; we want to control. We want to remote control. We want to be able to monitor in. And so we've built a £1.8 million digitalisation technology centre. That's not actually it. That's something from the Siemens plant in the Middle East, but it is a little bit of what we're building currently, and we've already got the centre set up to an extent. It's a collaborative working space. It's open access, so businesses can come in and get hands-on use of the facilities. And what are those facilities? Well, actually, there's a whole range of really exciting stuff in here. It means that you can come in and have some hands-on experience, what we're calling serious play, with some cyber physical systems. So physical robotics, control, automation, things blended with the digitalization in the background. Some of that as simple as scheduling systems, and some of it more control, remote-based control systems. We've got an interactive digital factory. We're looking at data management, big data analysis. I'll say a little bit more about that in just a second, as well as having a smart digital lab where we have AI, machine learning, VR, AR for visualizing and digital twin building. And we've also got a whole range of IoT-based and cybersecurity facilities built in there, because exactly, again, just echoing what's just been said, the two cannot be separated. The more things you connect, the more vulnerabilities you build in to your system, and the more aware you have to become, and the more strategic you have to be about how you integrate cybersecurity into any digitalization project within a business. So the IDTC is built to help businesses go on their digitalization journey, and the center itself works as a bit of a narrative. So businesses come in the door at what we consider as industry 2. So these are businesses with very low level of sensor integration, low level connectivity, probably paper-based tracking, maybe just an MRP system. And then as we journey round the lab through a whole series of interactive demonstrators, we can get into automated production, we can get into data capture. We've got data capture kits. I'll say something about it in a minute. Retrofitting legacy equipment, capturing that data, but then trying to understand that data, looking for pattern identification, AI analytics, trying to become predictive with that data, and ultimately acting autonomously in self-optimizing and agile algorithms and control systems for process equipment or discrete manufacturing equipment or energy monitoring and control equipment. But at each of these stages, you expose new vulnerabilities and a greater number of connection points, and the more integrated that data becomes, the greater the business threat. So if you just have remote sensor data connected up to a cloud monitoring platform, the risk is relatively low because it's not connected to anything. People could potentially get into see that data, but how valuable that temperature profiles are unnamed is potentially limited. But as soon as you start integrating that with other systems or sharing passwords or anything like that, the closer you integrate it with other business processes, the greater the risk becomes. And so that's very much the journey we want to take businesses on, understanding where they are in their digital journey and the steps that they might take on that journey. And there's a couple of really practical ways that businesses can get started on this to sort of understand very practically the risk. And the first is we've got some sensor kits. When it comes to seeing data, particularly from legacy equipment or from current equipment, many businesses just can't see really what's going on in real time in their factory. And so we have sensor kits that we can provide through the IDTC project, including gateway devices that can lift data. That can be OEE data for the amount of uptime, that can be temperature data, vibration data, a whole range of different sensors available in these kits. Through an IoT gateway, and then connecting that to a couple of platforms, connecting that either into a simple data management and visualization platform, connecting it back locally to land-based server type arrangements within the business, or up to our cloud platform. And then the next is a data analytics platform. This is what I was saying. We've just finally agreed a tender award with Siemens with their platform MindSphere, which runs on top of Microsoft Azure, which many of you will no doubt have heard of. But this IoT platform allows for a huge range of data capture, connectivity, data processing, data visualization, and data deployment. So that full platform. And we have a whole number of subtenancies that businesses can actually sit on the subtenant license of that project, have their own discrete, secure area within that, and begin to experiment with what would it look like to use cloud computing. How much would we need? How much would it therefore cost us? You sort of pay by how much you use a lot of the time. What processing, what apps would we need? What would control apps look like? How could we integrate that with our current systems? What are the challenges and threats of doing that? And we're able, through our specialist technicians within the project and within our academic staff base and industrial partners, to help businesses de-risk those steps. And so those concerns that we were just echoing about, as you digitize further, you expose greater risk from a cybersecurity point of view, are exactly the sort of de-risking steps we want to be working with businesses on as they engage in this IDTC project, so that we can potentially, just within the secure network IDTC center itself, experiment and try on new systems and processes, but also through our cloud platform, mean that they can access those analytics securely, remotely, in their own factory, using their own data. And what that business support looks like, if there are Tees Valley businesses who want to get involved in this, or other businesses who won't be able to access via the support, but we're very keen to still look to support, is we will first of all help you understand where you are on your sort of digitalization journey, start accessing those cloud computing things and data capture kits, and then where you're doing something innovative and pushing forward, we're able to support with 6 to 12 month fully funded supports to help you really take practical steps towards a more digitalized future for your business. So that's a summary of the IDTC. We're really keen for businesses to get involved, to showcase what's going on in the region, to make businesses aware of how they can get involved, and to start accessing the technology as well. So thanks very much for your time, and I'm very happy to answer any questions that you might have.
That was really great, David. Thank you very much, and really informative, and a super exciting project to be involved in.
Yeah, of course, absolutely.
So a couple of things that I wanted to talk about. When businesses are going through this from 2 to 3 to 4, perhaps even from 1 to 4, is how much of this is a technical shift or a cultural shift?
Absolutely, yeah. And I think it's both. We've got to really, we've made sure that as we take business on that narrative, it's really underpinned with case studies of people who have done it. That one helps in understanding the ROI of these sort of stages, but it also helps understand that the key cultural shift. And I think it's one of these things where when done well and employees are engaged, absolutely transformative. But it's absolutely key to build that in early. There's another thing actually about employees as well, which is many businesses invest in digital solutions, but actually only a small percentage of them really reap the benefits of it. And I think one of the key reasons for that is that there's not someone who really owns that transformation that needs to take place. It goes to a production manager whose job really is to produce stuff, and for him to manage what's required to do a cyber security review alongside a digitalization transformation and everything else is no small task, particularly if that's not their background. And consultants come in you buy a platform, you think it will work, but I'm sure we all know here that it's not that simple, and the integration is a continuing thing that you have to continue to work on. And so we're also working with businesses through internships, through graduates and things as well, to put some feet on the ground of someone who owns it, because once it has a face, a person who's driving it forward, and people know that they're invested in the staff interest, and it's not just a faceless corporate campaign to remove workers, but that actually this is almost a support service. That is often what we see make the biggest transformation. We've got a great case study from a regional business called Mercer, who did exactly that through a KTP project. Took the business on an amazing digital transformation, some very, very significant production and efficiency savings through it, but actually didn't remove any jobs. In fact, what it did is meant that these operators could do what they were really good at and were being paid to do, not tippy-tappy data entering into PCs in between each job and things, which no one liked doing anyway.
I think that's the very point, David. I remember a story that a councillor once told me, an ex-miner. He said, "Like, I've never seen technology coming that didn't take jobs away," and so it's really about how you use that technology to create more jobs, to secure the jobs you've got, etc., etc. And that's really a function of the C-suite, in my opinion, to set that the agenda, what they're trying to do, and to articulate that to people involved in that. But when you have companies coming in, do you find, in terms of cybersecurity, are they coming in with the awareness about, I need to secure my systems from the outset, or is this something that you have to open their eyes to?
Yeah, I mean, we're working with a whole range of businesses, so you can imagine a number of businesses we're working on are already very digitally developed and are really working at industry 3, industry 4 already, and are looking to take further strides. They've got digitalized products. They're pushing forward and innovative in their business approach, and so those businesses, unsurprisingly, are very aware and very astute in these ways. There are also businesses we're supporting who are not that far along the journey, and who are looking at particularly retrofitting legacy equipment. But we are finding that all of them are asking the question, so I say you can have this gateway device, and they say, how is that secured if I put that on my network? Probably because they've tried to plug anything into the network, and if you've got an IT department, plugging anything into the network is nigh impossible. So I think most of them are aware that getting a box to plug into the network or connect to the Wi-Fi isn't that simple. I want to know what it looks like, and actually we have 4G boxes for that very reason, because often it simply isn't that simple to put an unknown new device into a network. Still takes time, and so sometimes it's easier where the connection's available, if it's just something you're trialing, to do it on 4G at the moment. But yeah, so I think most people have a degree of awareness, but I would describe it as a practical degree of awareness, i.e. I'm gonna have to do something about this, rather than the ability to do something about it.
Well, at least that's a start, I think.
I think so, yeah.
That was really good. Thank you very much, and beautifully seamlessly from the last presentation, and this leads me beautifully seamlessly into our next presenter.
Yeah.
And that we're going to talk about the Made Smarter Technology Accelerator. So kind of building on the journey of a company. And David Spencer, growth consultant at Tees Valley Combined Authority. Are you there, David?
Hiya, Phil. Thanks for the invitation. One thing I will say before I start is I've had the opportunity twice to visit the IDT sector that David's just been talking about. And a lot of the time we talk theory, what can be done, what could be done, what might be done. If you go along there, you can actually see what will be done, because it's physical kit. So if anybody's interested, I know they run tours every now and then. They really need to go along and have a look at what they're doing at Teesside University. We work really closely with Teesside University, and I've got to say I was really impressed with what they've got on offer, which shoots myself in the foot a little bit, because I'm now going to talk about what we have on offer. Okay.
Yes, but just before you start that, David, I think you're absolutely right. There are some people who can conceptualize. There's some people who need to see physical things in order to get them to work. It's a whole mix, but let's hope we get that invite. Over to you.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, I'm here to talk about Made Smarter. Some of you may have heard about it and know all about it. Some of you may have heard but don't really know what it is, and some won't have a clue. So I'll give you a little bit of history as regard the Made Smarter programme. A report was commissioned in 2017 to investigate why manufacturing, particularly in the SME arena, was not where it should be, why opportunities were being missed to other nations, basically. And Jürgen Meyer, who did the report, came up with 3 fundamental areas of concern. The first was a lack of effective leadership of IDT, which goes back a little bit to what one of the previous speakers said, in that the management of change and the introduction of something like digital technology has got to be done properly. And if it's not done properly, your staff get upset, your clients get upset. And that was one of the issues, the poor leadership of introduction, if you like. The second was the poor level of adoption. And what I mean by that is it sometimes takes us so long to make a decision as to what we want. By the time we've made that decision, it's already out of date. We don't get on with it. We leave it too long. We think about it too much. And the third area was under leverage of innovation, not using what's available, not understanding what's available. And I think one of the key areas here is when you're looking at digital technology, a lot of people don't know what's available. And not only do they not know what's available, they don't know who to ask about it. So to a certain degree, we bury our heads. We plod on doing what we're doing because sometimes we might be embarrassed to try and find out a little bit more about it. That started the project. And it's there to help manufacturers get that competitive edge. It's to help introduce digital tools that can move that business forward into areas where perhaps they've not gone before. And how can a business benefit? How can a manufacturer benefit? Well, if they start the Made Smarter program, they get fully funded advice from specialist technology experts. What I mean by that is we've created a panel, and that panel is made up of digital experts, people that are expert in their own field. It may be robotics, it may be software, it may be cybersecurity. And at a certain stage along this program, we introduce you to that specialist. But I'll explain that a little bit later on. We'll also identify the right tools you need. So rather than going out and somebody saying you need a CRM system, let's see whether you need a CRM system, because that might be not what you need. You might need an MRP or an ERP or something different. So let's get the facts right before we actually make that decision. Match funding. Well, again, in addition, you can advance your own skills on leadership because we run part of the course through Teesside University. And there's a number of workshops delivered through Teesside that will help improve your own ability, whether you're the FD, whether you're the CEO. Going back to the business about implementing change and why leadership is seen to be poor, what these courses will do is they will help you understand how to make change and how to involve your people. And the benefit of that is not just change in digital technology, it gives you the skills to look at any change that might be applicable within your business. You're changing rotors, you're changing suppliers, you're changing whatever. It will help you deal with how you do that properly. So it's much wider than just introducing digital technology. You even have the opportunity to bring on board digital native talent with a funded student placement. I'll discuss that a little bit more, but that allows you to bring in an intern to help you develop whatever it is your project is. Okay. Now, so what's the journey? Well, it starts with an expression of interest. You know, if there's a manufacturer out there that thinks this could be a benefit, they go online and they basically say, will somebody talk to me about this project? You then get a conversation with a consultant, such as myself. I'll give you a call or a Teams meeting and we'll have a chat about what you want, what you expect. Are you suited to this program? Because again, as David mentioned earlier, they've got their own programs and there are a lot of projects out there. And sometimes it can be a minefield to decide which project best suits you. Well, that's what comes up in this conversation. It may be that we say, Made Smarter isn't for you, but give David a call at Teesside Uni. He might be a better help to what you need to do. Once we've had that conversation, if we decide that you're suited and your eligibility is okay, you will go online and complete an online diagnostic. 45 questions, takes about 20 minutes, and it produces a report that tells us and the manufacturer where they are along their journey of digitalization. Some are shocked because they think they're further along than they are. An example was I had a conversation last week with a client who has an email address and a website. So he's digital. Obviously not, but he thought he was because that's all he needed. But there's also ones where they're actually better along the journey or further along the journey than they think they are. But they've never actually sat down and done a diagnostic or asked the appropriate questions to find out where they are. Once we've had that, once we've got that diagnostic back, we'll arrange a Teams meeting or a face-to-face meeting, and we'll sit and we'll have a chat about that diagnostic. And it covers various subjects such as vision, actual use of technology, where the workforce sits within the program, what sort of operations they've got. And we go into detail and come out with a plan, if you like. Now, it may be that at this stage, the manufacturer says, it's not for me. Well, that's fine, because that is still a win, because they've gone through the program, they know where they are, they know what they want to do, and have decided it's not appropriate for them. But if they do decide to go ahead, we basically sign them up onto the program. They then have the opportunity to attend 6 half-day workshops delivered, as I said, by Teesside University. And those workshops are broken down into introduction and strategy, basically talking about what digitalisation is, leading change. And as I say, that's not just change in digitalisation, that could be change in any area of their business. The role of the leadership, and ultimately building a roadmap. Where do we go from here? What is your plan from this point to getting what you need? And in fact, what do you need? Yeah. We then introduce them to an IDD specialist. Now, as I mentioned earlier, we've got a panel of specialists that have spent many years in the industry, some dealing with software, some dealing with robotics, you name it. But by this time, with the use of the staff that deliver the workshops and our own conversations, because again, we attend those workshops with them, so we get a full end-to-end picture of what they're doing. We can help them decide what it is they need. And as I say, they may think they need one thing, but the workshops turn out that they need something else. And at that point, we can introduce them to the specialist. And that specialist, we will fund. We will pay that specialist up to £3,000 to do a project. Now, that project may simply be offering advice, answering questions. It may be a proper scoping exercise. And that's one of the things that experience tells us businesses struggle with, because they often speak to a salesman. Somebody says to them, I need a CRM. So they get in touch with a company on the internet that sells CRM. So a salesman goes along and says, right, this is what you need. This will do everything you want it to do. So the manufacturer buys it. And I will guarantee that if that's the case, 50% of what they buy, they will never use, because it's a package. Well, they don't know they don't need it because they've never had one before. Yeah. Now, what our digital specialists will do was they don't get anything out of this other than the cost of the exercise. So they're not selling any particular product that they are going to make money from. They are putting in place a plan for what this manufacturer needs. And it may well be that they don't even supply it, but at least they'll have a proper idea, a proper scope of what they need, why they need it, what it's going to do, and what it's going to cost. Now, when that's done, we then get back involved and we will look at what that project is, what it's going to cost, and where possible, we will try and look at what funding is available to help them produce that project. Yeah, and they've got three choices. They can either sit there and say, well, I really don't want to do this. I'm going to go back to my spreadsheets. I'm happy with that. Or they may say, I want to do this, but I can't do it at this moment in time. I need to take a break and think about it. Or they may say, let's crack on. Whatever that option is, we'll support them in any way we can, any way we can. Now, this is the interesting bit that most manufacturers find interesting, in that, as David mentioned earlier when he showed one of his slides, there are so many different options for digital technology, and so many people have never considered it. The one that always makes me smile is the fact that there's mobile devices and wearable tech. And when you talk to people about that, they sort of say, well, what's the point of that? I'm a manufacturer. And you sort of say, well, yeah, you are, but your sales team are generally out on the road. Wouldn't it be nice if they can go out and meet somebody and place that order on a tablet? And by the time they finish placing that order, by the time they've got back in their car, that order is with the manufacturer office, and they are already planning how they're going to deliver that order, all within 5-10 minutes. And when you start talking about those sort of things, it opens up the opportunity of many other areas of technology that people haven't thought of. You talk manufacturing, you're thinking automation, you're thinking robots, you're thinking MRP systems, or whatever. You don't think about all the other bits, because going back to what I said earlier, many people don't know they're there. They don't know what's available. They don't know who to ask. Well, this project will allow them to ask the right people the right questions and hopefully get the right answers. So what's the benefit of all of this? Well, the benefit to the country, I suppose, is raising UK productivity and international competitiveness, creating new, higher paid, higher skilled jobs, and strengthening UK supply chains. Well, that's great, but most manufacturers really want to know what's in it for them. So what's in it for them is it will increase your volume of production. You can analyze real data and control production. Too many times manufacturers or CEOs or financials, whatever their position may be, will sit there on a Sunday afternoon thinking about, what am I going to do this week? How am I going to hit those targets? What's going to come in that I'm not aware about? And have to plan so far in advance and then hope things go well. Well, automation and the sort of things David was talking about with sensors will allow you to manage data immediately. You can control it in real time and you can plan for what's going to come up, and hopefully give yourself a little bit of breathing space for when something comes up that you're not actually aware of or you're not looking to. It will also reduce downtime with predictive maintenance. You know, too many times I've spoken to people where I can't meet you today, Dave, because my machine's broken down and I've got to get it fixed. And it's broken down at the worst possible time because I've got a big order to get out and I'm really struggling. Can you come back next week? Well, with the sort of systems you can now put in place, you can work out when that machinery is at its quietest. When is it not going to be doing much? When is the best time to actually turn it off and fix it now before it actually causes some serious problems? And digital technology will help you do that. It will also reduce your operating costs. Now, as a businessman, you know that there's two ways to increase your profit. You either bring more business in through the front door or you reduce what's going out through the back door. And this will help you reduce what's going out through the back door. You can manage your hours, you can manage your machinery, you can manage your operating costs, you can manage your stock and order, all in one system, in one cycle, which will save you so much time. Now, I've actually got some stats here, which might answer some of the other questions. Now, the project went live in the Northwest in January 2019, and these stats are accurate up until April of this year. Now, bear in mind what happened over the last 18 months. These are probably lower than they would normally have been. But having said that, over in the Northwest, over 700 businesses were engaged. And what I mean by that, that's not 700 businesses that expressed an interest. That was 700 businesses that had the meetings, went through the workshops, and came out the other end. Now, of those 700, 60 of them had projects, special projects that would move their businesses forward. And £1.25 million was funded for those businesses to help those projects. So there's a lot of money being thrown at it, and the success is really good. The interesting thing that I found when I was looking at these figures is, there's one of the presenters said earlier, as soon as you mention digitalisation to a manufacturer, what's going to happen to my staff? Am I going to make them all redundant? Am I going to lose my staff? You know, I don't want to do it because it's a family business and they've been with us years. But what the evidence tells us from the Northwest is, rather than losing jobs, you actually take jobs on. 900 new jobs were created as a result of the project over in the Northwest. That's 900 staff adding to the teams rather than losing them. And there was 1,743 existing staff upskilled. Now that's, again, we're not losing people. We're maybe retraining them to do something better than what they were doing before. The job role may change, but it won't go. They will still remain within the business. And of those 1,700 jobs, so some of them will be better paid. Some of them will have climbed the ladder, if you like, and been promoted. And ultimately, the gross value added has increased by 147 million. So when you look at the project that was run as a pilot over in the Northwest, everything is successful. And the figures that we're quoting here are factual figures. You know, we've not sat there and said, well, I think it's going to be okay, or I think it's going to bring in this much. It does. You know, it's improving business, it's improving jobs, it's upskilling existing staff. Everybody's happy. So what happens next? Where do we go from here? Well, I did mention that you could take on an internship. So Made Smarter, the project, helps students bring their skills and insight to the Northeast businesses, helping them implement new digital tools while gaining experience. And again, working closely with Teesside University. We will fund short-term projects, so we will generally fund a project lasting 3 months, and we'll fund it to the best part of £6,000. Now, what may happen is you may have a business that has got a bigger project and no internal skills to be able to run that project properly. So let's bring an intern in. Let's bring somebody in that's got a better idea of what is needed, and they can work hand in hand with the CEO or the FD or whoever to make that project work. And the interesting thing is that we pair up with the help of Teesside Uni. We will pair up the intern with the business, so the right person gets the right position. And these placements are open to third-year undergraduates, MSc students of any stage, postgraduate students, and in a number of different areas. But any one of those will be paired with the correct business. So much like the IDT panels, the IDT specialist, we will find the right person for the right role, and hopefully, ultimately, everybody benefits, especially the manufacturer. Now, I think the one thing to finish on, to be honest, is the fact that this is a starting project. It's for manufacturers that, they may be on the digital journey. They may be really good at digital, but want to improve. It may be businesses that have done nothing in the past, don't have any idea about digital, and are on the starting point. But where they finish is up to them. When this project is complete, when they've enrolled, or they've expressed the interest, they've had the meeting, they've done the diagnostic, they've had the workshops, they've met the digital specialist, they've had the project, it's been funded, it's completed. That is not the end of it. That is just the start of it. Because from there, they can go on to any other digital innovations that they may want. They might start as a result of this project with a CRM. But in 6 months' time, they might decide they want an order system that will link to that CRM. And 6 months after that, they might want a finance system that will also link, that will send out automated invoices. And 6 months after that, they might want something else. So this is just an introduction to get them started. Where they end or where they finish is really up to the manufacturer. Now, if there's anybody out there that's got any questions after this event, they go away and sit down with a cup of coffee and have a think, or they know anybody else that may be interested, my email's on the screen. Please bounce me an email. Give Tees Valley Combined Authority a call and it will come through to me, and I'll be happy to speak to anybody, face-to-face, Teams, whatever, just to discuss the project in more detail. Because, as I say, there's a lot of projects out there, and knowing which one's the best one can be really complicated. That's me done. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, David. It was really, really good, and I think it highlights some of the key issues that we need to face as a region. But so I was interested in your story about people saying, do we need a CRM, for example, and well, why? I haven't actually thought about it. And I've come across this many times myself, and really thinking you really need to start with that purpose. What is it you're trying to do? Yeah. And then identify which systems or which technology would fit in that. So there's a question of leadership here, I think, and how do we encourage better leadership, or perhaps how do we encourage people to challenge leadership better?
I think one of the benefits of doing the program the way it is when you get a cohort of business people, whether they're CEOs, whether they're FDs, whoever, when they attend the workshops, there's a cohort. It's not one-to-one. So you maybe get a group of 10 or 11 businesses. The joy is that in this program, all of those businesses are from the manufacturing sector. So yeah, you might have an hour's presentation or an hour's chat about introducing digital technology, but then you have a cup of coffee and you have a chat with the people sat around you, and you start to realize that the problems you're having, they've already experienced, or you might find that they're having a problem that you know about. And it doesn't necessarily have to be about digital. It can be about VAT, it can be about supply chain, it can be about cost bases, but you all start sharing information and you all start helping each other. And what we found in the past when we've run peer-to-peer networking groups, that the management side of it, or how to manage change, comes up anyway within those people talking. Because one person will say, well, I've been trying to do such and such, and I really don't know how to get the staff on board. And somebody else will say, well, I've already done that. This is what we did. So you get a lot of interaction around digital. But I think you're right. I think one of the biggest problems has always been managing change. And two things came out a while ago when I did an event a few weeks ago, and we were speaking to manufacturers, and we actually had experienced manufacturers having a chat. And they all said two things. Two things came out that caused them real problems. The first was they didn't get the staff involved from day one. they went in and they said, right, as of Monday, we're going to do this. And half of the staff oohed and ahed. Quarter of them said, fantastic, I wish we'd have done this before. And quarter of them didn't have a clue what to do. Yeah, but they didn't have time to think about it. And I think what you need to do from those situations is you need to start early on and you need to get them involved from day one. And sometimes what you'll find is if you say to somebody, this is what I'm thinking of doing, that staff member will turn around and say, well, I think you're right, but can we do this instead? And you tend to find that you develop a system that not only benefits you, but benefits them because they've wanted to do something for quite a while anyway, but didn't really have the nerve to knock on your door and say, Mr. FD, can I do this? So I think the first thing is getting involvement from day one and being open and honest about what you're doing and why you're going to do it. The second thing that came out of those presentations was the scoping exercise, where people bought what they thought they needed. They didn't spend enough time looking at the pain, because at the end of the day, this is to remove pain. You know, you've got an FD that loses sleep at night because something's not working. What can we do to help him sleep better? What can we put in place that takes away that panic, that pain, that worry? And sometimes we jump at the first opportunity rather than sitting back and saying, right, okay, this is my problem. I've got an issue with equipment that I have to keep fixing. What can I do about it? Well, let's speak to somebody that is an expert in that field. And that's where the digital panel comes in, because these have experienced all of these things before. So I think it's about being open and honest with your staff. And I think it's about being open and honest with what you want to achieve and with the experts you're talking to. Because you're not going to be open, they're not going to be open and honest with you unless they know exactly what it is you need to do. And sometimes I've had situations where I've said, look, I'm sorry, but I can't help you. You know, that I haven't got anything in my toolkit that is going to solve your problem. However, I know somebody that might be able to. And I think it's all about communication, to be quite honest.
I agree with you entirely. And my opinion and my impression is that nobody likes change to be imposed upon them. And
No.
Being part of that change is a much better option to get
Absolutely.
people engaged much earlier.
Absolutely.
And also, I think, releasing the latent talent that you've got within the organisation, because they understand that how the way the business runs a lot better than you do sometimes. Because
Absolutely. I mean, I used to work in a business that had a call centre, and they were constantly being told by senior teams how they should be handling those calls. But the senior team never made a phone call. So this particular day we said, okay, let's get the senior team on the phones. Let's get them making the calls. And then overnight, everything changed because there was a realization of the problems that the call center were having. And the call center themselves, some of the team actually came up with the solutions. You know, this is what's happening. And I think this is how we can fix it. Unless you're prepared to have those conversations, you're never going to be in a position where you're going to grow and develop. You're always going to have issues. And the experts are the people that do the job.
Indeed. Indeed. Well, David, I could talk to you all day, but I'm afraid we're going to have to leave that.
No worries.
We're recording these and we'll be pushing this presentation out. But one final question is, you deal with presumably the 5 local authority area of Teesside?
Yeah, it actually runs in the whole of the northeast. I deal with the 5 areas of combined authority, but north of that, those covered by the northeast LEP, I've got a colleague up that does exactly the same. The only difference is he doesn't use Teesside University, he uses Northumbria, but that's his loss.
But we won't hold it again. No,
Absolutely not.
Thank you very much, David.
Thanks ever so much, Phil. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I'm going to bring up my next David. So that's the 3rd David in a row, I'm afraid. And well, I'm afraid Security by Design. David Johnson from Communicate, and a lot going on in your land, I think. Growth, exciting growth within your company.
Yeah, we've had a rebrand this week as well. So for those who know Communicate, you'll see that we've got some new logos and things. So that's been really exciting for us. And yeah, we've got loads of exciting stuff over the next 6 or so months, which we're really excited to be able to share with people. So yeah, very exciting time for us, which is great. And it's been a challenge this week, getting all the painters and stuff in to change the logo. Our marketing team wouldn't let anything leak out until an 8 a.m. on Wednesday morning. But yeah, I'm excited to see what the future should bring.
Yeah, so Emily's a good friend of mine. I think she was heavily involved in it. So good job, well done.
Yeah, we're very pleased. So security by design, it's not a technical presentation, but if you want to have some technical discussions, then anyone can feel free to just give me a shout afterwards. My specialism here is really around helping clients understand where their needs are and helping reduce risk, and not spending money in the wrong places is more what I get involved with than people who sort of come and say, I've got a lot of money to spend on cyber. We see a lot of clients spending it in the wrong place, but us as a company, we're those people who know us, we're based up in the northeast. We've got an office in Wynyard Park, in the business park, and we've got offices now around the UK, including central London. I work specifically for the cybersecurity division, but because that's really integral for everything, we've got a telecoms department, pretty self-explanatory, network infrastructure, and various other bits and bobs, IT support, cloud services, and then building connectivity. Where we're actually working with getting houses connected in the northeast and other parts of the country. But me specifically, I'm the cybersecurity element. So yeah, my job today is just to have a bit of a discussion around secure by design. It's actually been mentioned by a few people today, which is great, because it's quite a challenge of mine when I go in afterwards and I'm trying to retrofit something, or my team are trying to retrofit something later in line. But the basics are, what is secure by design? Well, in the terms we're talking about today, in terms of software engineering, then it's very simple. It's just designing it with security in mind. So really, really simple. But for me as a non-technical person, why should I care? Well, it's my reputation if something goes wrong. Generally, the cost of fixing it, doing it right in the first place, outweighs the cost of a later fix and retrofitting in security. Most developers these days get paid for making something look great, making something really easy for the user. You go onto various websites and they're really easy to buy stuff. You know, Amazon's can be one where a couple of glasses of wine on an evening, the next morning you've got a knock at the door with various surprise items. Mine generally is bottles of gin I've ordered when I've seen them online. But there's very little thought normally from these developers in terms of the security. And then a lot of clients fix things after an incident or a suspected incident's taken place. What we're trying to get people to understand is actually, look, there's a lot better reasons to do that in the first place. So the first thing we start with is, look, so what? So what does that mean for me? Why should I care? You know, I'm a tiny business, I'm a global business, or anything in between. Why should I care? Well, LinkedIn's a prime example. Back in 2016, we saw a published amount of data, 167 million records. So if you had a LinkedIn account back in 2016, then 99.9% of the usernames and passwords were published online. Doesn't mean a lot now because it's quite a while ago, but you know, they've got a systematic issue where this is just a continuous issue for them. LinkedIn has been a bad example where actually they've been mentioned quite a lot of times in the media. For instance, over the past couple of months, we've seen another huge amount of data being leaked from LinkedIn because of a misconfiguration and a lack of security built into that application. Now, on its own, the data is not very valuable. I've grabbed some legitimate data off of LinkedIn here, but it gives their geolocation, the person's first name and second name, their annual income, if they've completed that on any of the sort of the internal documents, how many years they've been working at the company they're at and what company it is. And the geolocation, actually, I've altered that, but it actually took you to the person's house outside of their house on their Facebook. And we also had the LinkedIn version. It gives the actual geographical location of LinkedIn. Combining that information with a quick search I did on the dark web, I can see their password policies, their passwords are pretty rubbish. So I can see that on their personal Hotmail account, their password was Charlie's password 2016 exclamation mark. Their password for LinkedIn now is Charlie's password 2021 exclamation mark. Also, we've seen that one of their passwords for their corporates and their business was password 10 with @ and 0. And also I've got their Sage Payroll password, which is still correct. It is still valid. Luckily, these are one of our clients and we can pass them this data. But actually, this data just scraped by misconfiguration and a lack of security by design has opened a real load of issues for people who use LinkedIn, like me and like a lot of you, I'm sure, and people who use Facebook. And what it means is hackers' jobs are much easier. They can buy or download a lot of this data for free now. They can use that as intelligence to then target people specifically. In the news, a good one today, actually, weirdly enough, 22nd of September, we've seen another huge amount of data being hacked by a company who actually talks about cybersecurity and think they are a cybersecurity company. So they're actually a firm called Epic. And basically they're a web development company. They make people's websites, they do social media platforms for people, and they've been hacked, and all their data of all their customers has been hacked. They actually originally denied it and said they haven't had a data breach, but then published and sent an email out at 6:34 this morning confirming they have had an incident. But this is a company who develop websites, develop AI platforms. They actually talk about being secure on their website. Here's a snippet of their website, and the quote is, "Epic as security experts." I think that's enough of a company who's trying to promote themselves. So what we're trying to make sure is that people don't just believe stuff on people's websites, and they start digging into, look, what's your expectations from that third-party supplier, from people who are developing your applications. And an application might be something what runs manufacturing firms. For you guys who are moving into this more connected world we spoke about earlier today, it might be people who just have a website where you can take payments or you don't take payments. It might be that you have systems which interact with third parties for your supplier management, or for systems that you share between other companies. It might be the way that your company connects users together. All these things where it's connected to the internet and are known as applications, and security by design is a real key thing to get done properly. And it's cheaper. Like I said, there's still this belief that actually cybersecurity is expensive. It is something that people, retrofit on afterwards, and they ring someone and it's this magic art and everyone's wearing like a black hoodie who does it. It's just not the case anymore. Professional firms can be really cost effective, really pragmatic for the size of business you are. What I recommend to clients I have up in Teesside, who might be a manufacturing firm with 10 staff or 2 staff or 1 staff member, and a pharmaceutical business with 1,000 staff in one of our other offices down in Kent, and every company in between. The recommendations are based for what their needs are and their risk. If you've got a web application, for example, your website just is a brochure online, then there's very little impact which could happen from the website. Not nothing, because people could inject code to your clients. Customers might go onto your website, and the hacker might utilize the website to deliver malware and viruses to your customers or your clients or prospective clients. Normally for you, it's less work to look at development in a secure manner, and it's just another build stage. Everyone starts writing these complex documents to say, look, this is how we're going to do the cybersecurity element of our requirements. It's not that difficult. There's various ways which are free of charge. There's various organizations out there that the NEBRC will help offer security expertise and tools to manage this. And it's going to be less risk for your business. As a manager of a business, obviously we've launched a brand new website this week. Our security is important to me and my team, so we want to make sure that we're being pragmatic. We're not going to spend £1 million on securing a website, and there's no payment pages on it and things, but we do have to think, what's the impact to our customers, to our reputation, if that does get hacked. Great thing is these days is everyone's utilizing, a huge amount of people are utilizing third parties, whether or not that's Azure, AWS, whether or not it's an external web development company, whether or not it's a third party supplier, stuff like Sage for payroll, stuff like HubSpot or Salesforce for CRM systems. You've got a third party doing that development work and spending that money on security for you when you've asked for it. And most of these organizations, if not all of them, will have had a huge amount of pressure from bigger customers or customers they're wanting to win about cybersecurity. So don't be scared to ask them, how are you making sure my data is secure? They're going to be expecting it. The salesperson doesn't like to deal with that because it's extra work for them. them. But as a business, the likelihood is they've been through this, they are taking the right sort of action. But if you don't ask for it, there's a good chance that you'll be delivered something without security. If you ask someone to build you a really cheap house and you don't give them any specifics, you might not have a front door lock and you might not have a front gate. It's unlikely they're going to fit CCTV or a burglar alarm. It's the same with cybersecurity solutions. They'll have different levels for different requirements, and the pricing might not even be different. I've seen clients paying the same amount for similar services. One has cybersecurity in it because they've asked for it. One doesn't because they didn't ask for it, and developers are lazy. A couple of real life examples, and I'll dart through these pretty quickly, is looking at some of the examples of incidents I've specifically dealt with when I've worked for Communicate. Is I've dealt with one-man bands, public sector, an engineering firm, unfortunately, in the Northeast, another manufacturing firm, again in the Northeast, a doctor's surgery based in Leeds, and a telecoms company, weirdly enough, a competitor to ours based down in London, and an accountancy firm. And they all have different reasons why cybersecurity isn't really a main focus for them, but they all have one thing in common in this case: they've all been hacked. And they're all examples of people who've rung us after the fact. And actually, when we look into a lot of the reasons why this happens, it is because they've not asked the right questions of their suppliers and the people providing services or solutions or software for them. So a bit of a funny one here. I've put their bank account down at the bottom right for those who are interested in how they earn money. But the first one, the accountant. So no one in my sector does anything about cybersecurity. And to be fair, the person I spoke to wasn't overly incorrect. Accountancy firms can be more challenging for them to be secure, but it doesn't mean that they're not going to get targeted. This hacker, or in this instance, we're using the same hacker for the same instance. They were able to send phishing emails out from that client's systems by injecting malware into a software solution they were using from a third party, and they were able to steal £80,000 from customers' money. Next one, telecoms company. They were able to hack their system because of a web-facing GUI where customers could go in and change their telephone numbers, pay their bills, etc. And they made £100,000 worth of premium rate call numbers. So far, the hacker spent a couple of hours and he's got 180 grand in his bank. One-man band. Unfortunately, ransomware caught this person, this lady, and he lost all his financial records and was asked to pay an extortionate amount of money to get his data back. And unfortunately, with him being a one-man band, he hadn't really thought about backing up his data. And there was very little value to the data if he'd have had a backup, but because he didn't, he had to pay the ransom. She had to pay the ransom. Public sector body, their website was hacked. They relied on a third party to secure them. And then the website was changed to send customers to a fake payment page where they looked like they was paying for their council tax or for their bin collection of the recycling bin or whatever it may be, but they were actually giving them credit card details to the hacker, and the hacker was then able to steal those credit card data and use it for other things. Engineering firm, this is the unfortunate one in the Northeast, relatively recently was hacked, and they basically sent emails to all of their customers saying this bill is due this amount of money. They've got access to all their invoicing system, and basically they lost £83,000 in invoices, and so on and so forth. You know, this is just something really common, and you know, this could be a couple of days' work for a hacker, and you know, they could have nigh on £500,000 in the bank account. And this is the unfortunate trend where people not thinking about the basics of security, and a lot of these, now we've analysed it, actually if they'd have put a little more pressure on third parties, on the internal developers, on internal IT people, then it would be very unlikely that this would have happened. So for me, it's know your requirements. When you go out for a new website or you're going out for a new service, just talk about cybersecurity. You know, just ask the right questions. There's various standards out there, and this is a paragraph that I've stolen from one of our tender documents we send out. But you know, it's very simple. You know, what are you doing around your requirements for cybersecurity for the services you're going to deliver to me, Mr. Supplier? You know, at this stage, people want your business. People will bend over backwards where possible. Internally, if that's the case, then it's again just aligned to one of the frameworks out there. They are technical frameworks. You don't need to understand them. You just need to make sure that someone who does understand them can follow them. if it's your team of people, then it's really a change of mentality. Stop paying IT people to look at availability. My IT team, you know, great team, they very rarely get shouted at when we don't get, they very rarely get patted on the back when we don't get hacked. You know, no one rings our IT team and says, congratulations, we didn't get hacked today, well done. People ring up IT and go, I can't get access to this system's broken, I can't gain access to this folder. And they become subconsciously pointed toward just availability. And we want to move that trend so they're actually thinking about both, because availability is reliant on cybersecurity. We've seen a lot of suppliers, especially in the Northeast last year, being attacked with what are called DDoS attacks, which are effectively a hacker flooding your internet line so you can't do anything. Think of it as you're paddling up a river and then another 1 million gallons a minute of water come down. It's going to be very, very difficult to paddle upstream. So we want to make sure that we're getting ahead of this game. So what can we do, or what should we be doing? Just ensure that your tenders, your RFQs have security requirements, whether or not that's an open question of what you're going to do about my security. Choose the right supplier based on the mix of the budget available and your requirements as a business, and the risk to your business. If that service is controlling fridges in your factory and that goes offline, what's the cost to you? So what is the risk of not doing this properly? And toward the end of any development cycle with any software, third party or internally developed, make sure you run some automated scanning tools. Google vulnerability scanning tools. There's some tools out there for free. There's some tools out there very, very cost effective. We offer a solution should you want to buy from us, but there's a lot of solutions out there, and that captures the low hanging fruit. Around 90% of cyber related breaches which come through insecure development can be picked up by these tools, and there is tools for free. If you've got some good IT people internally, or you've got a good supplier, or you've got contacts within the NEBRC, I know they offer a service free of charge, then just make the call, because 90%, 98% risk reduction is very, very good. And then just ensure that your team and your suppliers stick any services which can be behind any protection mechanisms. One of those is what we call a web application firewall. Most firewalls have an option for these web application firewalls, and it stops vulnerabilities being exploited. So think of it as your front gate and someone monitoring the front gate. So traffic gets to the front gate, someone goes, who are you, what do you want? And if they're legitimate, then they will let them in through that front gate. That's what a web application firewall does. Don't worry about the technical implications of implementing it. Whoever's managing that software will do it for you, but most good firewalls will give you the opportunity to turn that on. Most of them are included. Some of them have a small subscription fee, but again, that's going to remove a huge amount of potential risk. And if your developers aren't overly good at security, then you're less reliant on them as your only security. If you have no front door locks and you have a security guard who works one day a year, the chances are you're going to get burgled. And this is about reducing that risk, or moving the risk to an automated technology which can do it better. So if I was you and I was going to send out an RFQ or a request for quotation or some sort of tender, then these are the types of questions I would want him to be asking those. It's really important for us to make sure that we're really keen with these with these questions. So does your supplier hold any certifications? I've highlighted Cyber Essentials. I don't like it as one to gauge people's cybersecurity, because they answer the questions and submit them with 100% trust. And in our experience, the content of these are not always correct. And does your supplier have people and processes in place that are responsible for cybersecurity, and so on and so forth? So these are some questions you can just ask of your suppliers and third parties, hopefully at the tender stage, rather than trying to retrofit it. So again, why should I care? Look, you know, the cost of breaches was gone through earlier with earlier presentations, so I won't go into it too much. But you know, the reality is the average fines for SME is still under 40k. We know the average fine is around 5k for less than 10 staff, and we know in the SME arena, you know, the ICO isn't really fining the majority above that. But if you've got credit card data, we know that Visa and MasterCard are not really sending out fines for less than 20,000 euros, actually, rather than pounds rather. 71% of breaches these days are financially motivated. So stealing your money or somebody else's money is a main focus for these hackers. And we've seen a 400% rise in people targeting companies using flaws in application to gain access to data, which will enable them to spend your money or ask for your clients and customers' money who owe you money. And finally, the ICO recently published a stat, you know, the fines have increased by nearly 1,600% in 20 to 21. So my final thoughts for you guys is, look, improve security will save you cost and will save you time. Really appreciate your time today. Any questions, please just have a look at our website. Feel free to make contact and just give me a call. I'm happy to chat with anybody.
That's great, David. Thank you very much. Another excellent presentation. And I've got a couple of questions, because I always do. But do you need to have a specific skill set in order to think about security by design? Or because it doesn't come naturally to people, does it?
No, it doesn't. And, you know, I've come from, you know, working in a bike shop, you know, 25 years ago to going into sales and into management and managed companies where I've had to think about it. It's not really a technical role. It flows down from the management. And it's the key thing is that somebody's asking somebody who's got the competence about it. And the norm would be the decision maker making the decision on a new service. And if it's an existing service, it's someone just thinking, look, what's the risk if something goes wrong? And that's something, you know, the finance director, a senior manager, a board member can just sit down and think, actually, if our website gets hacked, what's the worst that could happen? We don't need to think about the technical who's and how's that's happened. It's a management responsibility to filter that down to the business. Culture is always driven from the top. And it's a real challenge for many businesses to do that. But, you know, risk is held primarily by the senior management. You know, that's the key thing. So no, you don't need the competence. At some stage, there's going to be someone competent you've got to speak to get some technical, or at least a translation on how they're going to do that back to the management. You know, for many companies, they don't have an IT team and they rely on third parties, but those third parties will have expertise. And if they don't, those third party will have a third party who's got expertise. The key thing is know what your risks are and how much you rely on those systems. The unfortunate thing I've found, especially in manufacturing, and obviously that's been a theme of the last couple of chats, is that you have so much reliance on automation these days and on, you know, applications, and people don't think they have. You know, it was mentioned earlier, you know, we're right, we're not trying to get rid of people by automating things, but the nature of just how industry's changing means we've got more reliance on it, which means there's more risk. But people think, yeah, I need to be technical to understand this. Please, you don't. You know, I'm not overly technical. I've got some technical competence because I've worked in cybersecurity for 12 years. But, you know, the reality is I just assess risk as a human being and think, what's the risk, you know?
Yeah, I think that's wise advice. But you say industry change. There's no industry changing faster than the cybersecurity sector. It's every day there's something new. So how do you get that balance between designing in and you must have to go back and retrofit some stuff?
Yeah, there's always a nature of retrofitting security, or at least maintaining a level of security. If you set the benchmark of jumping over a hurdle what's a foot high, then that's reasonably easy to maintain. It's not overly challenging. If you set the benchmark really high, if you're a company like, let's say, Money Supermarket, or you're a bank, then obviously that's more challenging for them. And it's really looking at the current threats. Again, it's not a technical thing. It's how we're seeing, you know, threats changing and evolving, which obviously we are every day. You know, every day there's 54 new vulnerabilities introduced on average. That's just this year, and it's actually been a quiet year for new vulnerabilities comparative to recent years. So simple things like vulnerability scanning are really important because, you know, as mentioned earlier, 98% of web-facing or internet-facing application breaches comes from known vulnerabilities. And that's what these tools are designed for. You know, there's organizations and charities who will run tools for free. You can download tools for free. You can get a managed service where there's a professional helping you translate that into plain English. You know, if this happens, this would happen, and this is what you do to fix it. So it doesn't necessarily mean you have to put your hand in your pocket. It's definitely going to cost you some time, but you know, if you can reduce your risk by 98% by spending a few quid or a few hours a month, and that's going to be great. So yeah, I think there's all these magic boxes out there and which have blue flashing LEDs, and everyone tries to push them as the latest solution. It's very rare that adding another piece of kit into your data center or buying another software license is the solution. It's just not the case. Threats are evolving, and you know, we saw the Microsoft SolarWinds breach, which was, you know, very unusual, where it was, you know, something really hard to foresee. But look, you know, out of the 1,000 incidents we look at a year, it'll be one in those thousands which is really unusual. The rest of them would have been picked up by a vulnerability scan, and just by making sure that you're not doing silly things. You know, if you're publishing a new website and making some serious changes, just have someone competent to check it.
That's great, David. I'm going to have to move on there, but understand your risk, manage your risk is, I think, key advice there. Great, David. Thank you very much. And I'm now going to go back to the start again, where we're going to talk to Siemens. Ben Caley from Siemens Business Development Project Manager, Siemens Industrial Security Services, who's going to talk to us about industrial systems security. Are you there, Ben?
I am. Hi, Phil. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you fine, and I can see you fine.
Excellent. Glad to hear it.
Yeah, me too. And I can see your slides as well. That's great. Thanks.
All right, perfect. Thanks for the green light. Thanks very much, and good afternoon, everybody. Many thanks for joining this session, and again, thanks to the CyberFest team for the invitation to present today. As others have said, we really hope that you find this an interesting presentation as well. So my name's Ben Caley, and I work in the industrial security business within Siemens. And the idea of this presentation is about really giving a bit of an insight from the Siemens point of view on the topic of cybersecurity, but specifically looking at the security of industrial systems and what some of the main points of consideration are from our point of view. And having listened to the other speakers over the last couple of hours, there's going to be a lot of similarities with the topics that we touch on, which I think is a really good thing, shows that we're singing from the same hymn sheet. But hopefully we'll give you a slightly different spin on some of these topics and build on a bit more of the technical setting as well. So just before we get started, I wanted to briefly address who we are at Siemens and why we're here today talking to you about cybersecurity. You may know the Siemens name or the Siemens brand, I don't know, perhaps from a mobile phone that you had in the 90s, or maybe some of your kitchen appliances. But in reality, the vast majority of what we do as a company ends up going largely unseen or unnoticed. And this is because of the types of industries that we work in. So we have businesses across a number of different sectors, including things like factory automation and process industries, which comes under our digital industries banner. We've got what we call smart infrastructure, which is covering things like power distribution, smart cities, building management systems. We've got stuff covering the mobility sector, so trains, traffic light systems, traffic management, the list goes on and on, really. But the one thing which is common across all of these sectors that we work in is the rising need for solutions which are secure, and secure by design, as we've just heard from David. So building in technology which is going to help us as a company be protected, but also protect our customers, is really, really important across all of these different types of business. And I personally work in the digital industries division of Siemens. So today I'll be focusing on how manufacturing and process industries are looking at cybersecurity, and why we feel that it's particularly important for these types of businesses to look at this topic right now, just as we've been hearing about throughout the rest of the event. So, as we know, and as we've been hearing about, one of the major trends that we're seeing across industry is the adoption of digital technologies. And I don't want to cover old ground here. We've heard a lot about digitalisation, Industry 4, and the importance of this and the benefits that it brings companies. So I won't recover this, but instead really want to focus on the impact that these new digital technologies have on the cybersecurity requirements of businesses, and also have a look at some practical ways towards the end of the presentation on how we can start building in security to these systems and start to really make the most of these digital technologies, but making sure we do that securely. So we saw a similar graphic earlier on from David. David 2, there were 3 Davids. I feel a little bit left out not being called David today, I must say, but we did see this this graphic showing the number of connected devices earlier on, and I was really pleased to see that actually. And the reason I wanted to show it here is because it's a really great way of showing the relationship between the adoption of digitalization and the increase in security incidents aimed at the industrial sector. So as we heard earlier, the number of connected devices has absolutely exploded over recent years, and that's a really good indication of the adoption of digital technology in general. And at the same time, we can overlay on that a very similar looking trend, which is the number of cyber attacks, malicious cyber attacks, which have been aimed at industrial systems. So what we're not saying for a second is that this means that these new digital technologies and the opportunities that they bring should be avoided, but rather that let's make the most of them, but implementing them in a secure way. So again, very much emphasizing the points that the earlier speakers have made there, making sure that digitalization and cybersecurity are addressed hand in hand. And this trend to collect data from industrial systems, connecting that real world and the digital world, is absolutely something that we're seeing across every sector that we work in. So the topics that I'll cover in the rest of the presentation are relevant to all of the different sectors, the industrial sectors you can see on the slide here. So hopefully there'll be something which is relevant to everybody on the call, or something that will be interesting to you. So that was a quick look at some of the trends which we've been hearing about, but what are some of the trends in the security world that we're seeing as Siemens? So again, this will be picking up on some of the points that we've heard about already. So apologies for a little bit of repetition here, but I just wanted to set the scene from our point of view as a vendor in the industrial space. So firstly, the growing cyber risks to businesses. And I'm going to pick up this topic in a bit more detail in a moment, but these risks could be financial, as we've heard. They could be reputational risks. They could be risks from a safety point of view in an industrial setting. And the growing number of risks to businesses and the number of businesses that are actually realizing this, we've heard the stats earlier, it is absolutely a reality now. We've also heard and understand the fundamental technological changes, which are having a really big impact on how our industrial systems fundamentally look. The fact that we're connecting them to the outside world, the fact that we're having this convergence between IT systems and OT, or operational technology, is having a really big impact on how we tackle security. And at the same time, we've got a skill shortage. We've got a gap in the workforce, not only around engineering and technology skills, but if you add into that mix the need for people who also understand the cybersecurity side of things and the nuances in applying that to an engineering setting, you start to have a fairly significant problem for a lot of companies. And that's an area which we're working with an awful lot of customers on at the moment. And then on top of that, we've got the proliferation of professional hacking, which again has been touched on. There's been some great examples already today. But the fact that you can now purchase malware on the dark web, malware as a service, and the fact that that's how many attacks are now being produced is having a really big impact on industry, because we're seeing pieces of malware which are specifically aimed at industrial systems. And to try to combat that, we've got laws and regulations which are coming into play, both locally in the UK, global regulations as well. And a lot of industrial and manufacturing companies that we're working with are also at the moment trying to get their head around what these regulations mean to them and what their obligations are when it comes to security. So we've heard a little bit already about the types of risks to businesses, but I wanted to build on this a little bit more and specifically think about the types of risks to a manufacturer, for example, from a potential security event or a security attack. And these risks and the impact of those risks will be different from business to business. So some companies that we go in and work with, when we ask them what's keeping them up at night, what's their worst nightmare in terms of a cyber attack, their answer will be absolutely, it's plant standstill. We can't afford for there to be any downtime for hours, let alone days or weeks, which is sometimes the outcome of a cyber attack. Whereas another company we may speak to may say that actually loss of our intellectual property, our recipes, for example, is absolutely the most important thing that we're trying to protect. So there's just a couple of examples, and there's all sorts of other risks as well. So things like compliance with standards and regulations, potential fines that come along with those. The idea that actually in the industrial world, the topic of safety and security are very much interlinked. So there's massive risks in terms of personnel safety from potential cyber attack in the manufacturing and industrial sectors. And that could potentially be the biggest risk depending on the type of business that we're speaking with. So the key thing here, and again, it builds on what we've just heard from the last speaker, is that assessing that risk is a really, really important first step. And the fact that these risks are inherent with industrial systems as well as IT systems now is why we're starting to see more and more people investing and investigating the security of their OT systems, their operational technology, with the same focus as they have done with IT for many years. So to build on that a little bit, despite the fact that we need to protect both our IT systems and our industrial or OT systems, there are some really fundamental differences between these two worlds, and that means that we often need to look at how we protect them in fundamentally different ways. And what we see on the slide here is a number of different examples which kind of compare and contrast the IT versus OT world, but there's a couple in particular I just want to pick out. First of these is around availability, which again we heard about from David a moment ago, looking at the IT world, the fact that many IT departments have pressure from their employees on the availability of systems. And yes, it absolutely can be really frustrating, and it can also be business critical, the availability of an IT system. However, when we look at it in an industrial context, the availability of data can be far more critical. So availability of data in an industrial world could be the difference between an emergency stop button doing its job or not. It could be the difference between the kind of millisecond response times that we need on an industrial network for an actuator to be able to move within the kind of precision timeframes that we're talking about. So because we're talking about vastly different timescales here, the IT world where maybe a system being down for 5 or 10 minutes is frustrating, whereas in the industrial world, we're talking about milliseconds, that has a really fundamental impact on the way that we protect these systems, the type of technologies we use, the type of techniques we use. Another example is around the asset life cycles that we see in these two different arenas. So in the IT world, we're pretty used to getting a new phone or a new laptop, say, every, I don't know, 3 or 4 years. And that has an impact on how we secure those devices. It means that generally they can be patched. Generally, they've got the latest technology built into them, and they're being supported by the manufacturers. Whereas in the industrial world, we're often looking at sweating assets for up to 40 years. So we're working with a lot of legacy systems, and at the same time, these older systems are being connected up to the outside world for all those digital technology reasons we heard about earlier. So it's a really big challenge thinking about how do we protect this older technology while also connecting up to the outside world. So just a couple of examples. I'd love to go through the rest of them as well, but time's going to be against us on that. The key thing to take away here is that although the topic of security is absolutely applicable to both the IT world and our industrial networks, we do need to have an appreciation that we need to treat them differently, although some of the technologies will be very similar. Okay, so now let's have a look at how we can start to protect these OT systems. What are the main topics that we need to consider? And the key thing I want to get across here is that it's not just about technology. So this is true for any sort of cybersecurity program, but it's also absolutely true in an industrial setting. applying firewalls, putting endpoint protection on PCs, putting in security monitoring is all really important, and that technology makes up an important part of a holistic approach to security. But to complement that, we absolutely also need processes and procedures that sit behind it to make sure that these technologies are kept up to date, that they're still relevant, that they're being managed correctly. And we also need the people within the organization to understand their responsibilities when it comes to security. So this could be people working in the back office, this could be people working on the production line, and understanding of what their obligations are and what part they have to play in security is really important. And we heard right at the beginning of the presentations from Aaron that the fact that training's not there for an awful lot of manufacturing companies when it comes to security. So it's often a really good place to start. So what we're saying is that it's only when you have all three sides of these triangle that you're going to have an overall, we call it a holistic approach to security, but it's also sometimes known as defense in depth. And it's when you have a defense in depth approach that you're really going to start to see the benefits of the different elements that you're adding to your security profile. Okay, so how can we start to implement these ideas? How can we make it a bit more practical for an industrial system? So at Siemens, what we've done is take this concept of defense in depth, which you may well have come across before, and we kind of put an industrial spin on it. We've tried to make it a little bit more practical. So what we're saying here is that we need multiple independent layers of security to be able to secure a plant overall. And generally speaking, we can split these topics into three different areas. The first high-level area is around plants, what we call plant security. So this is where we look at things like physical access protection, CCTV, locks on cabinet doors, fundamental things like that. We also look at monitoring the security of the whole plant at this level, as well as those softer topics like processes and procedures, guidelines that I've just mentioned. That's all under the plant security banner. The next level down, we call network security, and this is all about building an industrial network which is robust, designed in the first place, as we've just heard, to be secure, is really important, and also incorporating the right technologies, so things like firewalls, VPNs, to make sure that the backbone of your system, which is the network, is inherently secure. And then finally, the lowest level we call system integrity, and this is basically about saying that each individual device that sits on that industrial network, it needs to be considered from a security point of view as well. So how do we harden each PC on the network? How do we make sure that each PLC, each HMI, each device which is making up part of that control system, how do we make sure that each of those is considered from a security point of view? It could be patching them. It could be making sure that usernames and passwords are correctly implemented. There's a whole host of topics that are covered here. But what we're trying to show is that it's only when you look at the whole picture, all of these different levels, that you're going to start to have that defense in depth concept kind of realized. Nice way to look at this, a nice comparison, is to compare the two graphics here. So what we're trying to move away from is a single layer of defense on the left-hand side, which could be air gapping your system, for example. Moving towards this defense in depth concept where we've got these multiple layers of defense, making sure that if someone finds a way to get over your initial wall, you've got those extra layers of defense there to protect you. So just briefly, a thought about how we practically do this with our customers. So Siemens are a vendor when it comes to industrial automation. We create PLCs, software, HMIs, motors, pretty much everything that is built up to create a control system. And as we've heard earlier again today, the fact that you have security built into the products that you build your system up from is really important. We were hearing about web applications. The same is true for an industrial system. You need components that have the right security features built in the first place. So that's part of how we're able to help people, by producing products that have integrated security. But then we also have our security services business, which is where I sit. And we're a services business which are there to support people in implementing these concepts. So that could be support in selecting the right products and configuring them correctly. It could be working with legacy systems and working out that actually we can't rip everything out and put in the latest and greatest security technology. So how can we put in other measures to help secure the system while also maintaining the next 10 years of life cycle of the plant, for example? Could be looking at softer things like policies and procedures or training, all those topics that we've talked about up until now. The idea is that we're able to offer that support to help people actually upskill themselves and make sure that their plant is not just throwing technology at the problem, as we mentioned earlier. The final thing to leave you with is just a note on standards, because it can be a really useful place to look for further information and best practice as well. So if you're interested in finding out more about industrial security in particular and securing industrial systems, OT systems, we'd very much recommend you look at the 62443 standard from the IEC. So reason for that is that it's specifically designed as an OT security standard. And because of that, and because of the fact that it's very, very comprehensive, it's been adopted by governments all over the world, including our own GCHQ and the NCSC. So if you're looking to align with a particular standard, I think it's a good place to start. And you'll also therefore be aligning yourself with all sorts of other regulations. So if you want any further information, then again, please reach out to me. I'd be happy to have a conversation with anybody who'd like to find out more, but also these standards are a really interesting starting point. So that's it from me. Thanks very much. And hopefully we still got a little bit of time for some questions, but if not, and we need to move on swiftly, then I'd be happy to pick anything up after today as well.
We are running out of time, but I've got a couple of questions, Ben, for you. If you don't, first of all, that was great. Thank you very much. And I think took us right back to the start and very nicely highlighted the relationship between OT and IT. So I liked your castle analogy, but I'm reminded that even Helm's Deep had some vulnerability in Lord of the Rings. And at one time, OT was just secured by keeping it separate from IT, but that's no longer possible, is it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of the kind of education piece that we're really trying to help people understand at the moment. So air gapping a system or keeping it separate from IT was what people thought was keeping them secure, as you've just said. But the fact that we are adding sensors to networks, or we're pulling data out to make our plants more efficient, is meaning that you can't separate them in the same way anymore. So that because of the adoption of digital technologies, as we've heard about all day, it means that the two worlds are blurring, and you need people who understand both sides of the coin and are able to secure that as well. So yeah, absolutely agree with you.
My final quick question, if you don't mind. Siemens is a global company. Is cybersecurity the same around the globe, or is it different?
I'd say that it probably varies less around the globe and more the types of industries that you work in, and also the size of companies that you're working with. So I mentioned standards at the end there, and as Siemens, we adopt the 62443 standard. Reason for that is that it is globally accepted. So that is being worked against for pretty much every major economy that Siemens works in, and therefore you've got manufacturing sectors. So I'd say that in our experience, the adoption of security is probably very similar throughout the world, but actually it's more to do with the sectors that you're working in and the kind of uptake of not only new technologies, but also the uptake of concepts like cyber that have a bigger impact.
Excellent. Thanks once again, Ben, and very informative, and just shows, I think all the story through this whole thing has been great and unified, and it's fantastic. Thank you very much. Okay, so our final speaker, who I think has been waiting very patiently since the start, is Callum Duncan from Sencode. And am I right in thinking that you went to Teesside University, Callum, or was that just me?
Sure did, yeah. Longer than I thought. Longer ago than I thought it was. The pandemic has suddenly squished everything.
Excellent. So you're going to talk us about cybersecurity in another important sector for the Teesside, and that's the gaming industry.
Yep. So I'll switch you over. Just let me know if everything's working.
I will do. Yep, I can see you.
Perfect. Hi everyone. Thank you very much for coming to Cyberfest 2021. I'd like to thank Dynamo and Accenture for putting on the event and sponsoring it. I'd also like to thank you guys for coming and hopefully either learning something or contributing something with these talks or anything that's going on. So as you can see from what's right in front of us, we've got a bit of a cybersecurity and gaming talk going on here. And what we're generally going to be covering is some of the threats that are facing cybersecurity companies and, you know, gaming in general, as well as what motivates these kinds of people and what types of things they're after. So we'll move on. A little bit about myself first. Hi, I'm Duncan. You can see I'm the co-founder and / technical director at Sencode Cybersecurity. I do some cyber awareness stuff. I do some web development stuff. I do some security research stuff. I love rock climbing. I love role-playing games, Dungeons and Dragons, anything like that, as well as, you know, if I needed some gamer cred, I've got 4,500 hours on Steam. So, you know, the whole lot of time wasted there, or, you know, time gained, I suppose. And then if anyone wants to contact me after the talk, those are some of my contact details and some of my information. And usually, you know, my mission when I'm working with a company is to try and roll natural 20 on their network and get as deep in and you know, try and hack them. That's my job, and hopefully, you know, improving their security posture by that and improve the company as a whole. So let's move into a bit of the content of the talk and try and discuss what type of things that you know, these hackers are targeting, why they're targeting them, and what they're after. Right? You look at the slide here; it's almost always money or data. Now and then you'll run across someone who is disgruntled and, you know, just wants to cause damage for the sake of causing damage. But a lot of the time, you know, especially with the video game market, it's worth something like 90 billion in 2020. So it's a huge amount of money that sort of flowing around and that hasn't been tested for security yet. And this is what we're slowly starting to see. You know, money, data, anything you can get your hands on while you're there, because you're either going to sell what data you find, or you're stealing actual money from them. Money is data, essentially. So what types of companies are they targeting? They're targeting anyone, really. You find that a lot of games companies, video games companies, are quite interconnected. You know, a large company will subcontract to a smaller company for, say, particle effects or some graphic design, and they'll subcontract to these larger companies, which means that the supply chain for these large companies like EA or one of the big publishers can be extremely large. And they're taking steps recently to ensure that their supply chains are secure. They have some requirements for people, you know, some requirements to companies that they work with, stuff like get a penetration test, ensure that you're meeting these standards, you know, ISO 27000, etc. And, you know, all this kind of stuff is slowly being worked its way in because of what's going on at the minute. And the size of the company doesn't really matter, right? You're going after the massive video game giants like PlayStation Network or Steam, and then you've also got like the smaller sort of indie companies that might subcontract. If I can get into a subcontractor, then I can go into these larger companies, or at least try and go into these larger companies. There's, you know, there's a whole lot of wiggle room for a hacker or an attacker in these types of companies to move up the chain, which is what you don't want to be happening. So we'll go on to sort of the three main types of, you know, it's separated into two types. You're attacking the company or you're attacking their games. Game hacking is a massive thing, right? People like lots of money making cheats, aimbots, any kind of thing that will give a player an advantage in the game. You know, so generally these sort of fall into these kind of three categories that we have here. Hopefully those icons help. But you've got your game hacking, so you're stealing, you're getting wall hacks, aimbots, stuff that will give you an advantage over other players, and then you're usually selling them or putting them out there for free. And you know, there's huge black markets built around these game hacking, game botting scenes. Games like World of Warcraft have massive botting issues because their in-game economy is so expansive that people will actually buy in-game gold, which leads us on to our second one, hacking accounts. So people will go in and try and hack into different accounts for levels, for money, for in-game items, which can then be sold onto some kind of market or used to blackmail other people. And these items and these currency can be worth a lot if you really start trying to hack the people and get their passwords and log into their accounts and get that money that is extremely valuable in that world, and then sell it on to say somebody that wants the highest level of account, or wants these special items, or wants some in-game currency for cheap. And then you've also got things like computer hacking. And this isn't necessarily hacking companies, but this could be finding exploits for the games themselves, so that anybody using that game or playing that game can have their computer hacked. This is becoming more and more of an issue. A lot of frameworks that games companies use, things like Source Engine and other game engines, are regularly updated to try and get rid of these types of things. But the older a game gets, the less it's updated, the less the engine's going to be updated, and the longer these vulnerabilities that would allow you to hack into another user's computer in the game are going to stick around. And this is something that is getting quite a lot of attention, especially from the sort of hacking community at the minute, because these games, although they get sort of game tested and they make sure that everything works within the game, there's a lot of wiggle room there for someone to try and hack the other users of the game through the game and steal whatever they like from the users. And then you have a bit of a fourth kind, which is where you go for the company directly, which is what we were talking about earlier, where you're going for whatever assets that company owns, whether that's a website or some servers or a database, and you're going to try and break into that database and compromise the users that way, as opposed to trying to compromise their actual game client. And a lot of people are trying to do this. One of the things that might surprise a lot of people is nation states are trying to slip their way into this. You think if you're a nation state and you have this ability to hack a lot of people and to draw money, one of the best ways to draw money out of these things, especially in such a large market, and not be traced too much, is through hacking video games. Hacking thousands and thousands of accounts on video games, things like gambling sites, and trying to hack as many people as possible to steal their in-game loot, steal credit card information that they might have stored in the video game, or trying to extract some of this monetary resource that these games companies have that generally people aren't especially dedicated to protect. You think you have an account from 5 years ago on a game that has some special items on it. Suddenly that account could be worth a lot of money, and you haven't changed the password in a while, and then someone just logs in and steals it. That's a lot of the time what these types of countries are doing, and North Korea is a crazy example of this, right? They have so many tariffs and sanctions against them that one of the ways that they try and extract wealth and earn money is stealing things like cryptocurrencies, in-game items. They had a massive scandal a couple of years ago where they were going into Fortnite accounts and stealing V-Bucks and then selling them to other, selling the account or some other in-game currency to other users. And you can see there, they're stealing 6 million from people, or they're targeting game sites, or they're infecting mobile games and then putting them on the App Store, and all these kinds of ways to extract wealth out of the industry because they're having a hard time generating it, or they have some form of issue. And what kind of hacker group or nation state wouldn't want a bit more money, right? And especially in the gaming industry where the supply chains are so long that it's there's so much attack surface, there's so much footprint there that you can try and do whatever you please, right? You can see if it works, fingers crossed. And it's not just small companies getting hacked by North Korea or individuals getting hacked. You know, all these companies on this list have had some form of data stolen or have been hacked. You know, CD Projekt Red most recently, EA, Sony. You know, the source code taken from these companies. That literally the most valuable thing, the most valuable asset they have is their brand and their IP, right? Because these games are extreme. That's what they make their money off, and they're getting broken into. Usually ransomware, or someone will steal some data and steal their engine source code, steal their customer information, and through a number of different ways, right? None of these companies have been attacked the same way. It's one of those things where each company is vulnerable in a different way and have dealt with or have had happen to them different outcomes. You know, some of the worst being, like we've just seen, CD Projekt Red, EA, Sony had their networks knocked offline. It's just every games company out there can have these kinds of issues. So we've got a bit of a case study here. A lot of companies, they use third-party tools. Subcontractors will be using third-party tools and trying to manage their infrastructure that way. And one of the things that people don't realize is this is, you know, the EA hack, which we're going over, doesn't necessarily have to be a traditional, you're hacking into one of those servers and you're stealing all of their data. A lot of the time it comes down to individuals and people. And this is exactly what happened with the EA hack. If anyone's familiar with the Slack, it's a bit like Microsoft Teams, but only text-based. And what happened was some hackers posed as a EA employee to Slack because they knew they had a Slack channel, or they assumed they had a Slack channel, and they posed as an EA employee, gave them a little bit of information to sort of prove maybe that they were an EA employee. And what Slack did, they gave them access to one of the accounts in that channel. They gave them what's called a session token. And they then put that in their Slack, and that allowed them the ability to interact with the Slack channels that were there. You know, you message everyone in EA, send a director a message, and from that you can then, you know, do things like phishing, or even just drop a piece of malware on their Slack channel and hope someone clicks it. And that looks like what happened. They dropped some malware in their Slack channel, and then someone clicked it, and they had their data stolen. They had their game engine stolen, I believe. You know, loads of information leaked about upcoming games. They had huge amounts of customer data stolen, and what really went on there was a bit of a social engineering attack twice, right? You're asking nicely for a Slack channel or a Slack account, and then you're asking for or hoping for someone to click it and stealing the data that way. And there's a lot of wiggle room for these types of companies to do that and work that way, because they, like I said, the footprint's so large. Right? You wouldn't think of Slack as a subcontractor, and in a way, they sort of are, right? You contracting a piece of your business as opposed to making your own chat application to a third party who you usually expect is secure, but you know, those people can be an issue, and there's so much footprint and scope there for an attacker that's one of the ways that, oh, why would they even try and attack that? And they did, and they were successful, which is crazy. So we've got a bit of a recreation there. Right, and it's essentially what these hackers did was ask someone nicely to let them through, and that's obviously from Doom. Anyone familiar with the game, like I said, it's a fantastic game, and I think that's probably where we we will end it. Anyone with questions, you can either pop them in the chat or send me an email directly. I'd love to get into contact with you guys. You know, things like game hacking and game company security, it's one of my passions. So if anyone is interested in that or wants to know more, or even just wants to start a conversation, please hit me up with that email or drop something in the chat. Thank you.
Thank you, Callum. That was really interesting, and an insight into a world that is not really one that I'm familiar with. But there you go. And
yeah,
my understanding, it's a very important sector to the region. In fact, ENL here, aren't they? They have a presence in the region.
well, precisely, and it's a bit of a look into the dark arts, I suppose. You know, a lot of these talks have been industry based, and when I'm working with a company or we're working with a company as a company, we go in and we give them a different kind of perspective, and hopefully that's what we've brought here.
Yeah, absolutely. Because the rise of gaming, I think, in many ways emulates the changes in manufacturing. I mean, so like NES, and then you went download, handheld, multiplayer. Now it's all in the cloud, isn't it? And it's kind of a huge dynamic shift, which is kind of where manufacturing is going. So lessons to be learned.
Yeah, precisely. And you know, manufacturing, especially with the supply chain issue, is a massive thing. You think of, you know, it's an export. It's essentially, you know, companies in Teesside are exporting this and making these games, and their finished product might take years to create, as opposed to a manufacturing company which can make hundreds of thousands of something. And these, you know, these supply chains can get extremely large and can be essentially one of the greatest downfalls for these companies.
Indeed, indeed. And the trouble is, cybersecurity or attack cyber is such a blunt tool. It's so much easier to attack than it is to defend. You may just dump 100,000 attacks on somebody, but you've got to try and protect against all of those.
Sometimes you get lucky, right? Well, really unlucky, I suppose, and that's where, from an attacker's perspective, that's where automation comes in, right? We're not going to sit there, and maybe a big company like that, but we're going to sit there and write a script that will try and attack these companies, and it doesn't matter if it doesn't work 99% of the time. You know, that 1% of the time we'll get in.
Yeah, absolutely. So you have to defend against the 1% rather than and not worry about it as the attack.
Yeah.
So just perhaps an odd question for you, but I just want to wonder whether you could give me an opinion. Could gaming and gamification be used to improve our understanding of cybersecurity as an issue?
100%. At least coming from an attacking side, the people that we work with and a lot of the people that we hire as staff are learned through this gamification process. In the cybersecurity sort of penetration testing industry, we have massive infrastructure set up where people can test their skills and earn points and go through. We usually call them vulnerable boxes, right? It's a machine set up, and people try and hack into it, and then you get points if you get in there. And especially on the defense side, you know, trying to defend a box from these attackers and getting points that way, you know, there's so much kind of flexibility there, and it's because it's such a large industry. There's so much you can do to really include gamification in the learning and the teaching.
Excellent. Well, I'm a few minutes, I think 3 minutes over time, so I'm going to have to call that quits. But thank you very much again, Callum. It was really interesting, and I think brought the business of today to a nice close. Look, there's a lot of people I'd like to thank. Obviously, Teesside University and Siobhan, Digital City, for helping us to put on this event. Erin started us off about Make UK, and I think really set the tone for the rest of the day. The Industrial Digitalisation Technology Centre from the first, David, fascinating, great opportunity to get in and play with some real good ideas. And then David Spencer taught us about the Make Smarter Technology Accelerator and real practical steps to help people think about their digitization journey and making sure that what they're doing is secure, which brought us on to nicely with David and his security by design, really thinking about the risk and that you're going to be faced and mitigating as much of that as you can. back to Ben, Caley, talking about OT and IT. And I think there's a subject I might want to come back to in some future events. I think as these two worlds merge, and then finally, big thanks to Callum for bringing it all together and looking at gaming, something slightly different. But I think there's a huge opportunity here from one industry to learn to another. It's not competitive, and it's a great way to learn from each other. And of course, I'd like to thank Claire from Beacon House who helps me through these, and you for attending. Thank you very much. And look out for the next event, which is actually this afternoon at 4 o'clock. And we've got another one tomorrow, and then 3 more left next week. See you later.